Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Toffee TV USA. My name is James Boyman, joined by my co-host Ryan Williams for episode 4. Ryan, how are we doing today?
Not too bad, James. It's another week where there hasn't been a lot of news, so we're going to try and fill up the time. Probably not going into too much detail today, but we have some observations, and I'm excited to be back with you as usual every week.
Indeed, yeah. When we started this weekly news show, we were under the assumption that there would be weekly news to discuss. It has been relatively slow, but we will nonetheless dive into some topics today. We're going to be doing a little bit of a review of our episode from last week where we discussed some of the in-depth statistics of Everton thus far this season. We're going to take a look at those relative to the win against Fulham last weekend, of course, and maybe try to project outwards how those stats will continue to look. And then we're going to do a little, of course, for those of you that don't know, tomorrow is Thanksgiving in the United States. We're going to talk a little bit about Everton players that we are thankful for. But before we get into that, Ryan, let's kick things off with some stats for the people.
Yeah, we went through a bunch of different things and again, it's just additional information. Don't kill us for bringing up some numbers, but we do like to take an objective look at things, like I said before, just to see what it tells us, And a lot of them sunk with some of our observations too. There wasn't too many dramatic things, but one of the things we did talk about was movement and whether we were really getting back and forth up and down the pitch, whether we were working. And there was some concern that we really weren't. One of the stats and metrics we looked at was the concept of progressive runs. Now, I defined that last time, but that is an actual stat. That's not just someone running around like an idiot, which we have at times, I guess. But against Fulham, it was actually a pretty big difference. We had several individuals that had them. And I think we mentioned last week that Richarlison led our team with under 4 a week. And sure enough, my man, Alex Iwobi, and I would be remiss if I didn't.
Show it to the people.
Keep calm. Let Alex Iwobi handle it. Anyway, Alex Iwobi had 6, which is really a big number, honestly. It's he hasn't had that many in a long time. I really haven't. I'm not sure another Everton players had that many all year. That was a big difference, and I thought his ability to get up and down the pitch was a key element of our attack. And even in the second half, when we didn't generate too much, he was really the one threat that still was able to carry the ball forward and create a couple things and alleviate that pressure. So, yeah, I think in that particular instance, that number does stick out. And I think that speaks very positively. I think the other numbers kind of we looked at in that same attacking vein was passing in terms of getting a high volume of key passes, creating shots from a pass and getting the ball into the box more. And the final third, we didn't see that. But one thing we did see that was a little bit different, which seems kind of obvious, is we had 22 crosses. We've not had more than 17 in the league yet in any single game, and that is a hallmark of our pass sides. And when you have Dominic Calvert-Lewin in there, as well as Richarlison, a guy who's pretty good in the air, why would you not? And again, that doesn't mean looping stuff in the air. That simply means that we did attack in a little more volume on the wings. And I thought that was very good to see. I know one thing, too, that you've always harped on is the way we attack the different sides, as well as one thing that you noticed in particular that Everton was not doing very well in the last 3 games preceding the Fulham match was just our passing network. It looked dire, a lot of stuff just back and forth between center backs. But, James, this is a very different scenario, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, most definitely. And just to quickly add to the points that you made, I mean, everyone was giving Alex Iwobi a ton of credit on Saturday because he was just that with the ball. He was really, really aggressively looking to bring the ball forward consistently from that kind of right wing back position, which is something that I think the only other player on the right side that we've seen aggressively drive the ball forward that way would be Seamus Coleman in any sense. And in his absence, I think Iwobi did a really good job of both getting the ball forward and kind of finding the balance between offense and defense. We know that he's not naturally a defensive player, but he is a big, strong physical player, as Carlo mentioned in some of his comments and pressers this week. And so that could be a potential interesting long-term solution. And then, yeah, the passing. I mean, the crossing has been Everton's most effective way to create goals now for a few seasons. And a lot of teams do that. It's not uncommon. But to get that many in when we have a poacher of the nature of Calvert-Lewin, a player who can finish both with both feet and his head in Richarlison, just getting them the service. It's that simple. And seeing Richarlison back in the side obviously helped provide a ton of balance, which segues nicely into the conversation about pass maps.
Yeah, the balance is key because it seemed like we attacked from both sides almost equally, and that had not been the case in several matches preceding.
Yeah, and furthermore, I mean, a lot of the times what we see is an over reliance on using the outside players to get the ball forward. And that's just kind of the way that modern football at the highest level is played. You have to, that's most teams will try to leave the center compact and force you wide and
Sure.
give you what you can take. And we did a good job of exploiting that, but we also did a good job of getting Allen and Decore involved in the middle. We see you look at so for example, the top 10 links, the two players who are most frequently passing each other the ball. At number 1, we have James Rodriguez and Decore, 24 passes between them, 12 on each side. So that is a really good indication. Decore in the central mid, getting the ball to James, who is kind of in that free floating role. Second is Yerry Mina and Michael Keane, which won't really surprise anyone. You've got your center backs. They're going to be on the ball a lot. That's how you
Typical.
generally recycle possession, of course. Next up is Decore and Iwobi. So you have players that, and it's interesting because that's actually, again, toward the right side, although James drifts, he was in name a right winger, quote unquote. So to see the emphasis of getting the ball down the right side when traditionally the left side has been our strength was really interesting to see. But later on, you get into it and you've got Michael Keane to Luka Dean is next up. So you just see that sort of balance. And none of these relationships are like, none is dramatically higher than the other. The highest is 24, then 22, 19, 18. So it's pretty balanced in that we're going to both sides. And then I think the sixth one is Iwobi and Rodriguez, which is a really good relationship. If they can build up a good rapport and a good understanding of what the other is going to do, that bodes really well for our ability to create on the right side, which, with Theo Walcott last season was not something we were all that good at. And we've been missing that right side presence for a long time. So if we can start to create that and find that balance on both sides, it's really going to do wonders for our attack.
Yeah, I think it was really key how well we moved the ball too. Like you said, attacking the final third when a team's being compact is hard. The Premier League is known for big physical players, from speed, athleticism. In order to beat that, you've got to move the ball. And we saw a lot of that. And I think a lot of that is the reason why we're effective, not just the pace of doing it, is I think we did a pretty good job this time. One of the things we talked about was getting our best players the most touches. And that definitely played out against Fulham.
Most definitely. And so if you look, we talked a lot about James's touches and how the last several games, he hasn't been getting nearly as many as he did in the first few games when he was lighting up the league. Today, or rather against Fulham, 57 touches in 73 minutes. At halftime, he was well on pace to get his most touches in an Everton shirt. Of course, he came off early, which prevented that. But then the next three guys with the most touches, Decore, Iwobi, and Luka Dean. So you're getting your most dangerous players, bar Richarlison, you're getting your most dangerous players the ball. And that's only going to bode well. We talked about it. If you're in any sport, you want your best players to have possession and be able to create and do things. And we did just that. And I think it's worth the little slight asterisk that it was Fulham. They weren't great, and we did maybe struggle a little bit in the second half. But still, these stats are better than they have been the last 3 games. And I think that shows, at least from a numerical standpoint, why we were able to win.
And look, they are a good attacking side. It's not like they don't have weapons. And so one area we focused on was some of the defensive metrics, which are a little more difficult, I think. We've talked about some of the flaws. Again, these are just numbers. They're just pieces of information. Every sport has them. Not always do they work well for certain things, but just defensive metrics across the board. One thing that did stand out, at least against Fulham, was we had 14 interceptions. That's the highest we've had in the league. I mean, the next highest was 8. So it is at least some indication that we were picking off passes and making it a little bit difficult for them to split lines. And we talked about some of the gaps between the midfield and the defense in the last couple matches. We didn't see that as much. I mean, we also said on last pod how important it was to find the right midfield combination. I feel like it's a lot easier, and we both said this, to have 2-man in midfield working together. And I think Allen and Decore did a pretty good job in there. Decore in particular had like 9 takeaways. It's just an outrageous, I mean, it's an unbelievable number. He was all over the place, but rarely did you see one of them go forward without the other supporting him. And so while yes, they had a lot of possession, and when you sit back a little bit more, which we did in the second half, you're going to concede more possession. We weren't pressing as high. I think number one, that has to do with some of our guys were tired. The international break was not too easy. Even for Yeri, you didn't play the second match. That had to be a stressful time to be part of a Colombian side that just got smashed twice. Coming from South America is not the easiest thing. And you could tell Richarlison was dead even well before they subbed him off. But the bottom line is, even though we packed it in, if you look at expected goals and you look at the chances they created, ignore the penalty, because that obviously would weight the numbers too much. The expected goals was higher in the first half than it was the second half. They really didn't create too many moments, I think, of terrible fear, other than the penalty, which is more just an individual mistake, as well as, hey, Lookman dusted Dean. He did. He went right by him. But really, the only reason why they scored there, too, is, Loftus-Cheek got open, but Yeri just made an individual mistake. He just didn't get down to his knee quickly enough and deflected in the goal. That was it. I mean, there really wasn't a lot of danger other than those. And I think that's a good thing. And I think, one other thing too, it's one thing to be disciplined positionally, but another thing was I didn't feel like we were reckless too and running around like a bunch of idiots. And I think we had seen that in the past, accumulating a lot of cards. That's something we picked up. I think the last 3 matches preceding this one, it was something like 4 cards, 2 cards, 3 and 3, and 2 reds, maybe the 4 matches, I think, preceding that. That's a terrible record, but we didn't see much of that against Fulham, did we?
No, we didn't. I mean, we had no cards. So that anytime that you can escape a match without picking up any significant discipline, I mean, the only, as you mentioned, there was the individual mistake from Yerry Mina leading to the goal, and there was the foul by Godfrey in the box that led to the penalty. But again, those are individual mistakes isolated. And I think highlighting the XGA in the second half is really important, and it kind of speaks to a point that actually I think you tweeted earlier this week, that upon rewatch, it really wasn't as bad a second half performance as people made out. And I think I alluded to it on the pod, where people kind of just assume that everything that has happened in the past will come back. The ghost of Everton past, where we haven't been able to hold on to those kind of leads. So anytime that you have a big lead and you start to see it slip a little bit, the panic starts to set in. Okay, we're going to blow this. This is going to be like Newcastle last season, yada, yada, yada. But it's true. I think a lot of that is just sort of unconscious bias by fans, or maybe even conscious bias. When in reality, especially after we made the substitutions, bringing Gylfi and Tom Davies on, there really wasn't a whole lot Fulham did to threaten our goal. And I think people were just kind of frustrated that we weren't being more aggressive to attack. But again, you attack, you leave yourself exposed on the counter, and Fulham have good attacking players. I think it was perhaps even wise of Ancelotti to rein things in. And again, the discipline is really, really crucial, because we can't be going without Luka Dean and Richarlison for games over the course of the season, or anyone really in our starting 11, because we've seen how thin we are. So anytime one of those vital first 11 players is out, it's bad enough if they're out with an injury, but if they're out through a self-inflicted decision on the pitch, that just shoots us in the foot even more.
Yeah, and I think it's all product of the same thing, being focused, having a game plan, and seeing it out. And I thought the guys showed some maturity in doing it. And look, they were playing a slightly different, more unfamiliar system. I think you can blame that a little bit, maybe even on the first goal.
That's a good point.
But they did settle in, and I wasn't as nervous as some others, but
I was.
Well, I think we all get it. I mean, when a team has the ball that much, anything can happen, and that's the risk of doing it. Unless you're really sound, really well versed. Those are certain Ancelotti learned from the best. Ariadne Sachi is really the main guy he learned from, and his hallmark was coordinated defense. They pressed like crazy, running out at people. But they did it together as a unit. And Carlo, if anyone understands the need to do that, as we saw some of it, it's certainly something to build on. I guess we'll put it that way.
Most definitely.
So, making a little change of pace here after we've knocked into the stats and moving away from that, in the vein that it is indeed going to be Thanksgiving Day, I think, when this comes out. We couldn't help but notice that Everton very nicely posted an interview with Landon Donovan on the site. And to quote them, "To mark Thanksgiving in the USA on Thursday, Everton FC sat down for an in-depth interview with American great Landon Donovan to discuss his 2 memorable loan stints at Everton and why he will always cherish being a Blue." Now, I have to admit that got me thinking as well about what I am thankful for. And we thought it'd be kind of fun to take a little trip down memory lane to talk about maybe the players, the American players. There have been many, which is why Everton, Tony Sampson, this is for you, is America's team. But truly, I thought it'd be fun to talk about the guys that kind of maybe helped lead us to Everton, the American players in particular. So I'm going to start off with my guy, Joe Max Moore. Now, most Everton fans are thinking like, how long did he play with us? Longer than you might think. But Joe Max Moore is an interesting player for the U.S. He came over on a free transfer from New England Revolution from MLS, where he was lighting up the league. He's still actually the sixth all-time leading goal scorer in U.S. men's national team history. So I love Joe Max Moore. He was a little guy, he's diminutive, but he was so tough and such a fighter, but he was very clever and actually creative. The U.S. didn't have too many players like that at the time, and he was definitely one of them. Now, Joe Max kind of, obviously I was aware of Everton at the time, but I got kind of excited that he was playing for what I thought in my mind was such a big club. And he started off.
Correctly.
Yes. And we're, of course. I mean, yes, true. Maybe not quite at the time, but
Sure.
I think it's very amusing when he showed up. I mean, felt like every time he stepped on the pitch, he scored. I mean, I think he scored something like 6 goals in 7 matches in crazy display between January and February 2000. And it was really cool. You know, they were singing songs about him, more. There was a funny song about Joe Max Moore and David Beckham and, being better looking or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. Pretty good stuff. And it was exciting. It's kind of interesting. He went on to play 52 times for Everton. Didn't score too much after that, but made 22 starts, 8 goals and 4 assists. But anyway, he was a unique player for the U.S. at the time. And unfortunately, he got hurt. I was actually at the match in Korea when the U.S. played Portugal and Joe Max Moore hurt his knee, which is a total bummer. It kind of killed his career after that. But yeah, Joe Max Moore, thank you, my friend. And thank you, Evertonians, for making him feel welcome enough and getting me excited about Everton while watching him and the few chances we could growing up, because a lot of people don't realize that there was no European soccer on, at least when I was a kid. So this is kind of some of the first forays we could really watch, or at least get on the internet and, learn about it and stuff. So yeah, Joe Max was a key one for me. James, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to go with a less perhaps obscure pick than Ryan. And for those who are familiar with the show and its history, this will come as no surprise, but I'm going to go with the classic, the legend, U.S. men's national team legendary keeper, of course, Tim Howard, friend of the American Toffee Podcast. Incidentally,
Yes,
we, of course, had him on the show a few months ago to sit down, and Alex and I were able to meet him when we made our first trip to Goodison on match day and it's weird thinking now, but this was the last home match with fans allowed in the stadium against Manchester United with the 1-1 draw when De Gea played that deflection off of Calvert-Lewin in the opening minutes. And anyway,
should have been a win.
Should have been a win. Robbed by our first Premier League match live in person, and we were robbed by VAR.
Garbage.
So I mean,
garbage.
It's poetic in some ways and tragic in others, but I am thankful for Tim Howard. First of all, he is an unbelievable guy, super nice, an amazing representative for the club off the pitch. And we're going to talk a little bit about his on the pitch achievements, but to be such a strong character, to be such a big personality, and one of the very first American soccer stars, guys who truly captured the national spotlight in the World Cup. There have been plenty throughout the years, but as the sport has grown more popular, I think Tim's performance against Belgium was one of the, I think, maybe watershed moments for U.S. soccer, perhaps, and certainly exposed a lot of Americans, countless Americans, to Everton in the first place. I have him to thank for one of the primary reasons that I'm a fan, and to have such an impressive career. There's a history of American keepers in the Premier League, but 354 appearances over the course of 10 seasons, over 1,000 saves.
Amazing.
An amazing achievement. And he really, truly, in interviews and in every public appearance, represents the club and truly understands the club and speaks so eloquently about it. And, now that he's on, of course, NBC Sports weekly coverage of the Premier League, it's great to know that we have a blue in our corner, although I'm sure he tries to be as unbiased as he can. He does a great job as an analyst as well. And as I said, an amazing guy. And for the U.S. men's national team, over 120 caps, the most capped goalkeeper in U.S. men's national team history, 62 wins, 42 clean sheets. So big thank you to Tim Howard. It was great to meet you. Was great to watch you in a blue shirt, and all the best in the future.
So I, of course, have to come up with another lesser
Yes.
known American because that's just me. And the interview was already about Landon. So what am I going to say about that?
Right.
My guy, and probably in all honesty, my favorite soccer player of all time is Preki. I know people may think that's insane, but
Wait, before
gotta,
you go in, Ryan,
yes,
I just want to say Ryan is so excited to talk about Preki.
I am. It's true. It's true. Yeah, this is just a ridiculous excuse for me to bring up Preki on a project.
Go off.
Yes. So pre-drag Radjo Slajovic. That's right. I don't know if I got that right. It doesn't matter. He's Preki. Yeah, the guy, he only played 46 times for Everton, 22 starts, 4 goals, 2 assists. He was actually pretty decent. The teams weren't great. Howard Kendall bought him for $100,000 where? Out of MLIS. So from the Indoor Soccer League, think about that. MISL, pardon me, straight to Everton. And I remember seeing Preki play in the Indoor Soccer League. He was playing for Tacoma at the time, the massive metropolis of Tacoma, playing against my dear Pittsburgh Spirit, and he would just tear them apart, and it was frustrating. But yeah, in the mid 80s, believe it, that's all we had in America. I mean, North American Soccer League was defunct. There were some smaller leagues. So Preki was truly a superstar. And it's funny, he did the same stuff for Tacoma, that same move. He sits it on his left foot, takes to the outside, cuts back, rolls over, and bang, he's gone. All throughout his career. He was one of the few truly technical players the U.S. had, like a flair player. We didn't have many of them. I distinctly remember, he eventually played for the U.S. later too. That was kind of the interesting part about it, or else it might have attracted me more obsessively to the club earlier. But yeah, it's funny. Then after Everton, he went back to MLS from ages 32 to 41, won the MVP twice, including the second time at age 39. 39. Wow. Made his debut for the U.S. at age 33. Probably best known for the goal that actually beat Brazil at the 1998 Gold Cup, the only time the U.S. has beat Brazil. We won't bring up the loss in the Confederations Cup final. Anyway, we still lost the final to Mexico, but whatever, we still won. So either way, I want to give thanks to Preki, as well as the Evertonians everywhere that seem to embrace him, as well as the other Americans on this lovely Thanksgiving Day. And just in general, everyone, I think the big reason why we truly love this club is the people and the fans and the reception we've gotten being over there for me a couple times now. And I really appreciate it. So that's what I'm going to give thanks to. Thanks for Evertonians everywhere.
Yeah, big thanks to everyone out there, to all of the American Toffees who are watching either after Thanksgiving. Hope you had a great one. If you're watching on Thanksgiving, hope you're having a great one, et cetera, et cetera. Great holiday. Look forward to seeing Everton play Leeds at the weekend. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our link in the description to all of our podcasts and socials. Give us a follow, give us a like, give the video a like, give Toffee TV a like and a subscribe if you haven't. All that good stuff. Otherwise, we'll be with you guys next week. Appreciate everyone checking it out. Leave us a comment. And until next time, up the Toffees.